Just waiting to make sure that we are on and we are live streaming. Ladies and gentlemen, Clause 91.4 of the Governance and Meeting Conduct Local Law provides the following statement: that this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be retained by Council in accordance with the Council's legal obligations, and as a visitor in this meeting, your presence may be recorded. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge our traditional owners on the land in which we meet, pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to the communities, anyone from Aboriginal communities or Torres Strait Island communities that may be here with us today. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the opening prayer is: Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people on whom we serve. Amen. Thanks, Brendan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along to the meeting here. I know there's some contentious issues on the table here tonight, but I do respect or expect that everybody shows respect and diligence towards each other in the crowd and both here at Council. We'll move on. I'd like to introduce Juan Hernandez here on my right hand side. Thank you, Juan, who is filling in the Director's role for Corporate and Leisure and in place of Director Brindley. Because there are so many people here, I just might go around the councillors and directors table, just show you where everybody is here, and I'll start with Director Swart. Thank you, Director.
Hello, I'm Stephen Swart. I'm the Director Sustainability and Culture.
Thank you, Juan. We've already done you, so I'll move to Director Goonan.
Marcus Goonan, Director of Community and Infrastructure.
Councillor Aaron Grant.
Councillor Harry Russell. Brendan McGrath, CEO.
Dean Rees, the Mayor.
Harvey Beckman.
Councillor Ashley Fitzpatrick.
Councillor Jack Herring.
Councillor Dave Fuller.
Thank you, everybody. There's no item number 5. There's no one absent, and number 5, acceptance of apologies and granting leave of absence. That is not applicable tonight. There is no citizenship ceremony today, and I'll go to item number 7, which is the confirmation of the minutes from our previous meeting, which was only a couple of weeks ago. And I look to Councillor Grant to move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Fuller. Councillors, all those in favour? Yes, and that motion is carried. We will also go down to item number 8, which is conflict of interest on any items within the agenda today. And I'll firstly go to our CEO, Brendan McGrath, with your conflict, please.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. I have a material conflict in item 22.1 as it deals directly with employment matters relating to me.
Councillor Benton.
I have a conflict of interest, general conflict of interest in 14.3 as one of the members is a family relation.
Thank you, Councillor. Item number 9, there is no reception of petitions and hearing of deputations. Item number 10, we'll move straight to item was to go over councillor reports, as there's none, and we'll go straight to officers' reports. And item number 12.1 is the Community Management Annual Report, and I turn to CEO McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor. Each year the Council is required to provide a report to Council on the activities of its asset committees. We have committees right across predominantly the rural areas, but not just the rural areas of our shire, that manage things like reserves and halls and those sorts of community facilities on Council's behalf. So each year we do a report back to Council on some of the activities conducted by those various halls, and that report is here tonight for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the gallery on this report? Thank you. Can I have someone move this report? Councillor Fuller and Councillor Fitzpatrick to second. Councillor Fuller, any comments? Councillor Fitzpatrick? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, CEO McGrath. I'll now turn to, there's nothing under 13, Corporate and Leisure, and we'll turn to 14, which is Community Infrastructure, and 14.1 is the Recreational Open Space Draft Strategy Adoption for Exhibition. Director Goonan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is presented to Council to seek approval to undertake community exhibition on the draft Recreation and Open Space Strategy 24 to 34.
The recreation and open space strategy has been developed as part of Council's commitment to accessible recreation and the benefits of public open space to the community. The strategy will set the direction for planning, development, maintenance and activation of spaces by the rural city up until 2034. Quite extensive consultation has already been undertaken on the plan to get to this point. These include internal council interviews, project control group sessions, community survey with over 600 respondents, sports group surveys with 36 clubs participating, 7 community drop-in sessions across the rural city with over 100 attendees, school sessions, sporting group interviews, review of place score data and council sporting group survey from 2022, councillor briefings, advisory committee review, sport and recreation and reference group, environmental and sustainability. The recommendation is that council endorses the draft recreation and open space strategy for public exhibition until the 29th of February 2024, acknowledging the Christmas and New Year period. Reviews and considers all submissions with amendments made to a draft to be presented at a future council meeting, and if no submissions are required if no submissions requiring changes to the recreation and open space strategy are received, adopts without further resolution.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on this point? Thank you. Can I look for a mover? Councillor Benton, and a seconder, Councillor Grant. Councillor Benton, did you want to talk on the open space strategy?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Being one of the councillors sit on the Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee along with Councillor Bussell, there's a lot of work been put into this, specifically after the initial contact and Director Boonen has outlined, and the officers have done a tremendous summary of this, and I think it's very important that that's noted to make it a far more readable document going forward. And I would urge everybody to read it because it does affect the rural areas as well as has been told, to get any recommendations back in to us in that period of time that they feel that have been missed in that strategy, because it'll be something we locked in for 10 years, could be. With review that if you're a member of your networks, just advise to be able to make sure that you've got an interest in open space, and everyone seems to want to have a little bit of green space or walk or whatever, but I just urge you to make sure you read it so you're comfortable with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? No. Yes, Councillor Harry, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, I certainly acknowledge and recognise a really significant amount of work that has gone into this document. I think it's in an improved form in its current form. The earlier forms didn't actually reference climate change, and there were a couple of gaps there, which fortunately feedback has been responded to, and there is now mention and reference of some of those sustainability and climate factors. I must admit though that I still feel there are gaps or a lack of fully capitalising on possible co-benefits. So this is a really large strategy. It relates to our built environment. It relates to, it's a proposed 10-year strategy. It relates to our interaction with the physical world, and a significant amount of the information in the strategy referenced surveys that highlighted that our demographics ageing, we have significant low CIFA rankings and disadvantage in the community, that walking and cycling, which are also forms of transport, that concept of co-benefits, are constantly ranked in the top 1, 2, 3, top 5 certainly. And lack of infrastructure for those things is constantly ranked as the biggest disadvantage. So this strategy does, in my opinion, defer a little too much to a walking and cycling strategy, which sits in parallel in that respect. It doesn't necessarily always do that with respect to other master plans or strategies, like, for example, tennis court facilities in Merrow Park. So I just, in the future we're heading into and keeping a long-term kind of thinking hat on, I just think that there could be some more co-benefits kind of wrangled out of this. We have limited resources going into the future, and we have to really always keep that at the fore of our minds. But I'm endorsing this to go out for further community engagement and look forward to hearing what the community's thoughts are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Any other councillor to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Benton, did you want to finish off?
I think we've said enough. Okay, move on.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. 14.2, which is a C4 22220 HVAC maintenance service, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is presented to Council to provide HVAC maintenance servicing to approximately 133 managed facilities, including operational centres, preschools, sports pavilions, community halls, and other council-owned facilities where council support the delivery of the services within those facilities. This service is required to fulfil council's legislative obligations in accordance with the Building Act and other regulations. The facilities are maintained by council and used by various community groups to provide a range of services within the community. The recommendation after evaluation process is that council awards the contract to Airmaster Australia, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the relevant documents, and discloses the contract price.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Are there any questions from the gallery on this issue? Can I have a mover, please? Yes, HVAC, which is our air conditioning systems. There is a special, that is an acronym for something.
Air conditioning systems.
Air conditioning system. There you go. Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Can I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Fuller, thank you. And a seconder, please, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Fuller, did you need to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Bussell? Any other councillor to talk? We'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Director Goonan, the price, please.
Given how hot it is in here, we might actually get them to come into this room first and do a little bit of work, but apologies for that, everyone. The price is $279,809.22 GST exclusive.
Thank you, Director Goonan. We'll move on to 14.3. Councillor Benton, you have a conflict. Can you just disclose that conflict, and you're happy to leave the room?
Yes, it's a person appointed on the advisory committee as a family member, or family relation.
Thank you, Councillor. Director Goonan. Thank you.
This report is presented to council to seek endorsement for the nominations for the community members to represent the Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee. The Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee provides advice to council on matters pertaining to strategic planning, support and advice together with management of sport and recreation opportunities and facilities throughout the rural city of Wangaratta. The terms of reference for the Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee allow for up to 9 community members to hold positions, with 3 members completing their terms and a pre-existing vacancy. There are up to 4 positions available. Nominations were received for the Sport and Rec Advisory Committee and are assessed against the skills matrix. The recommendation is that council accept 4 people to receive, to be approved for nominations as representatives of Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee, and advises all applicants of council's decision.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the gallery on this point? No. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Bussell, Councillor Grant. Councillor Bussell, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This committee that Councillor Benton and I sit on, they're very, very passionate sports people. They contribute an enormous amount of knowledge into the council in all things sports. So I want to thank the existing members, and I want to thank the ones that are about to be voted on for their volunteering. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grant, did you have anything to say? Yes.
I need to say that they're one of our more successful committees, and to acknowledge the work that they do and their consistency and support.
I agree with you on that one. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? No. Councillor Bustle, anything further? No? I'll put the recommendation to vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Do you have the names there, Councillor Bustle?
I do have the names, Mr Mayor. Alicia Canning, Murray Braden, Jacob Schonfinger, Alison Allen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Benton can come back. We've skipped through everything, we're just about to close the meeting. Director Goonan, item 14.4, which is the Wyzak expansion project contract variation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is presented to Council to recommend to increase the award amount for the contract for the Wyzak extension. The works are progressing to a 70% completion stage, and completion is expected in early 2024. During the construction, cost escalations have been encountered due to a rising cost of materials, in addition to future-proofing the building to support future home of the Wangaratta District, and the Netball Association has also caused slight increases in costs. Officers are seeking approval to increase the contract value to provide contingency for future works that may arise. This increase is funded within the adopted budget. To be clear, no additional funding on top of the adopted project budget is required. The recommendation is that Council approves the increase to the contract award for an additional $150,000 and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to approve the changes to the contract documents.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on this point? No. Can I look for a mover, please? Councillor Fuller and Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Fuller, any comments? Councillor Fitzpatrick. Any other councillor like to talk on this? Yes, Councillor Harry, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to reiterate that point that Director Goonan made, that this is a variation on the contract. However, it is within the original budgeted allocation amount, so it will just be, I guess, a potential compromise on the amount of savings that we have to gain from this project, but it's not an above and beyond cost. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other councillor, Councillor Fuller, nothing to say to end off as the mover. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to sustainability and culture with Director Swart with a number of planning applications. I will state it is very hot in here and very hot outside. If more than happy, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting, that if your point is finished and you're required to go because of the heat, etc., please, you must look after your own health and go. So there's no hassles in coming and going. Cheers. 15.1 is the planning application 23/010 service station to 22 to 28 Riley Street in Wangaratta. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. This report's about a planning permit application seeking approval for the use and development of land for a service station and food and drinks premises, alteration of access to a road in a transport zone 2, and installation of signage at 22 to 28 Riley Street, Wangaratta. The application was referred to relevant authorities and notice of the application was given in accordance with the statutory requirements. A number of objections were received in response to the application, and the application was amended. Notice of the amended application was also given. At the time of writing this report, 61 objections to the application was received, and more recently a further objection was received. There was a further one objection was received. Having undertaken the assessment of the application against the Planning Environment Act and the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, and having considered public submissions to the proposal and the responses from referral authorities, officers are of the view that the application is consistent with the Wangaratta Planning Scheme and recommend that Council issues a notice of decision to grant the planning permit, subject to the conditions contained in attachment 1.
Thank you, Director. Before we go to the recommendation or the mover or seconder or an alternate recommendation, I'll go to the public for any questions on this matter. Thank you. If you just come forward and please state your name for the record, thank you. That's it. You've got it.
My name is Manny Cradle. I'm actually here with two questions on behalf of Jackie Schultz, who lives with her partner and their small children at a property known as Kinross, directly across the street from the proposed development. The property has been in her family for a very long time. Jackie's a business owner and cannot attend this meeting tonight. Here is what she's authorised me to say. Since the demolition began, this site, like APCO and McDonald's, has become a haven for kids taking drugs and getting into trouble. Our neighbours have found empty drug bags along the site. We have video footage of kids hiding from behind our vehicles last Thursday night when a massive group of high school kids were trying to fight police and hiding from them. We came out and showed the police where the kids were hiding. It wasn't nearly this bad when the site was below repairs. This got much worse when the site will become much worse if the site becomes a 24-hour service station. It's such a bad site for any 24-hour business. We live directly across the road and have small children, and I have two questions. First one, we find it hard to believe that anyone from Wangaratta would have approved this application. Did Ms. Sawyer, the planning officer, physically visit this site and adjoining properties when evaluating this application? Would you like me to go with the second question first?
No, I think we'll answer the first one. The first one, it hasn't been approved as of yet because it hasn't come to council or not approved. That's why it's here tonight. So we'll wait and see what the verdict is on that one. So, Stephen, did you have something further on that one?
Yes.
Thanks for your question, though.
In terms of site visits, yes, the site was visited by the officers involved in the assessment, including myself.
Thank you. And the second question, Minnie?
Thank you. What will council do to protect our family and neighbours from the type of riffraff who already hang out at McDonald's and APCO, where there are not occupied homes directly across from them?
Thank you for the question. Director Sword?
Yeah, I think it's important to try and understand the term riffraff there, but if you are referring to the kids that you mentioned before and the trouble that's been experienced on the site recently, those are police matters and not considered as part of the planning permit application. If there's any criminal activity on any site in Wangaratta, I encourage people to contact the police.
Thank you, Manny. If there's no further questions from the gallery, Jeremy? Oh, sorry. Again, Jeremy, just say your full name again.
Jeremy Griggle. I'm guessing that not many residents know this, but apparently, I guess council would know that according to the planning website, VCAT has only limited jurisdiction to resolve disputes where matters require the consent or satisfaction of the responsible authority. The proposed general conditions on this permit, 7A to 7C especially, but many other proposed permit conditions, are already conditions under the Wangaratta planning scheme for this site. Therefore, those clauses themselves do not say to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, and therefore do not limit VCAT's jurisdiction to resolve disputes. But with these conditions, it seems like council's proposing to limit VCAT's jurisdiction over those permit conditions. And would councillors consider moving to strike all the redundant conditions that already apply via the planning scheme?
That question was a question for councillors, but I'll answer from a technical perspective. In many cases, there might be conditions embedded into the planning system that you describe as redundant. We would make a point of actually adding those to permits to make sure that that is clear to the applicant if a permit is issued, that they need to comply with those conditions. In many respects, we would point out that that has to be to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, council in this case, to make sure that they get approval for that before they move through the development process. So wording might be that, you need to get approval from the responsible authority before you can get to the next stage. So that's just a stopping point for us to be able to look at whatever submitted under that condition and decide whether it's appropriate and sufficient for the development to go ahead from that point onwards. Our intention isn't to limit VCAT's powers in any way, shape or form. It's really a practical arrangement for us to be able to administer conditions.
Thank you, Stephen. Jeremy?
So can I just clarify then, I guess for my second question, is it not the case that VCAT has only limited jurisdiction to resolve disputes where matters require the consent or satisfaction of the responsible authority?
I'm not certain about whether it's limited. I'm certain that VCAT does have the power to consider those matters under different parts of the Planning Environment Act. And that includes, for instance, an application for a determination to VCAT. So in any circumstance where somebody feels like council is not interpreting the planning scheme correctly, but also other parts of the planning system, including planning permit conditions, you could apply for the determination through VCAT for them to actually determine how that part of the system should be interpreted. So they still have powers to do what you're describing. I'm not certain whether, the way we've worded permits would limit any of that.
Okay, then I would defer to my original request, which is if this motion goes forward with a motion to approve, that council considers removing the wording to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
Thank you for your question, Jeremy. Thank you. Thanks, Liz.
Jill Cullen. So this is a follow-up question, and it's one that my partner and I were talking about today because we've had experience with permit conditions with our property. So I am wondering what happens if the permit goes ahead, the site is operating, and the permit conditions are not adhered to. What happens?
Certainly. Director Swart, obviously it's our job as the planning authority to make sure those conditions are adhered to. Stephen Swart, do you have something further?
Yes, as the responsible authority under the Planning Environment Act for planning permits, we are responsible for enforcing those conditions as well. So if it's determined down the line that they are not meeting those requirements, we have to follow up with enforcement action, and there's a number of options available to us within the planning system to take enforcement action, including things like planning infringement notices, VCAT action, court action.
So would neighbours be able to institute action from an enforcement officer if they noticed that there were breaches of permit conditions?
Yep.
Generally, that's how that starts for us. We get a report from somebody that says, well, look, we don't think the conditions are being met, and we will then investigate that report. And if in fact we find that the conditions aren't met, we then go through a enforcement action process.
So what are the statistics showing how often that happens?
We're unsure. We haven't had many enforcement actions against other operators here at council at present time, so we're hoping that continues. But everything that does get spoken to a councillor or to somebody else, action is certainly taken through our enforcement time. There's certainly lots of action taken with relation to parking in wrong locations, etc. We haven't had any great, to my knowledge, over my 7 years on council, anything against any proposed service stations or service stations like APCO, apart from general tidiness around them with rubbish being thrown around with McDonald's, etc. I've certainly spoken to a few in relation to that has just been spoken to the owners directly about it.
And the impact of that sort of thing we have in our street, like people leave McDonald's, they don't throw the rubbish at McDonald's, but they throw it on our nature strip and down our driveway. So do we have any recourse there for that sort of a situation?
Yes, you can certainly complain through to council on those complaints, and it'll be acted upon and spoken to McDonald's. It's them to the operators of those stores, etc. It's their job to make sure that rubbish is maintained on their site or go away. Can't always control bad behaviour. That's the problem.
But if it's a breach of their permit conditions,
Correct.
the action would be taken by council?
Yes.
Or they would go, no, it's all too hard, we can't control bad behaviour?
No, if it's a breach against their conditions on their permit, 100% taken by council.
So they're meant to keep all their waste on site?
as best possible. With takeaway waste, it's hard to control that. I don't know whose responsibility. That's the police responsibility for people littering.
Okay.
But I think we're getting into pedantics on this. But
Yeah,
thanks, Jill.
sorry,
Right.
I did have another question, which I got a bit sidetracked. So we know that 61 objections were received. We know that there's been a really strong community reaction to this proposal. I'm just wondering if the people who are in the gallery could stand up and be here for this particular reason tonight, just to show that there's quite a few of us here. So, it's quite a few people for a council meeting on a hot night. Thank
I thought
you.
there would have been. That's why I mentioned at the start. Once the issue is finished, you're most welcome to go and get home into the pool.
So the Vic local government document called Roles and Responsibilities of Councillors says that a key component of the role is to reflect the interests of the municipal community. So I'm asking each councillor, how will your vote honour this responsibility?
Yep. You'll find out shortly when we have that vote. We can't access vote until the recommendation is on the table.
I guess I'm asking people to think about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jill, for any questions. Thanks, Anne. Could you say your name too, Anne, please, for the record?
Anne Shaw. I wish to just make a short statement for context followed by a question. The
Yep.
Rural City of Wangaratta's community vision lists 78 objectives, and according to Council's proposal for this application, it only aligns with 2 of these objectives. Rural City of Wangaratta's council plan lists 30 objectives, and this proposal only aligns to 1 of these objectives, as stated. My question is, could each councillor and director at the table please explain how this proposal is deemed to be suitable when it so poorly aligns with council's own vision and council plan?
Yep. Thanks, Anne. Great question. I think you will hear that in the responses coming from councillors when the recommendation is on the table. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes, sir, please come forward.
Is this on?
Yep, it's on, ready to go. Just your name, please, sir.
I'm Brian Thompson. I live at 16 Moore Street.
Thanks, Brian.
Look, my question is in relation to the planning department. So I note that the recommendation is that the development be approved with the condition that it not have an impact on the amenity of the area, with reference to a number of ways that it could have an impact, such as visual amenity, noise, odour, lighting, etc. My question is, how did the council planners come to the conclusion that a 24-hour, 24/7 petrol station could actually be built and not have an impact on every one of those points of amenity?
Thanks for your question.
Yep. Thank you for that question, Brian. I think it's important to note that when we assess planning permit applications, it has to be assessed in the context of all the relevant parts of the planning scheme and all the relevant parts of the Planning Environment Act. Out of that, we go through a process of considering whether it meets the requirements of the planning scheme and the Planning Environment Act. And we also then consider other information like I mentioned before, referral authority responses and objections. Out of that, we make a recommendation whether we think it's appropriate to support the application or not from a technical perspective. And if the recommendation at that point is to support the application, we turn our minds to what conditions could be placed on the application to try and make sure that the operation doesn't have adverse off-site impacts. And that's where that condition comes in, and a range of other conditions on the permit. I think there's 60 conditions proposed for this permit. So that comes down to what was mentioned before. So we need to be ready to administer that condition, and should it be determined that the operation doesn't meet that condition, we need to be ready to take action as well. In this case, a judgment call has been made that we should put a condition on there, not just about noise, but there's a list of other things that we think maybe has the potential to do that, and we want to make sure that the applicant, if this permit is issued, they are very clear that those types of things need to be managed very carefully.
Thank you for your answer. Just a supplementary question then. Do you have the resources to monitor and enforce those conditions?
I'm just nodding to make sure that I can
Yes.
answer. Thank you. Yes, so we have a statutory planning team at council. One of their responsibilities is to take enforcement action when it's reported to us, and one of that aspects is to investigate. So when we get reports, we will investigate in a number of different ways. Site visits is an obvious one, and if we find that there's a breach of a condition, we will take action. And there's been a number of examples where we've taken action recently to different degrees. Most of the time, we'll start with things like warnings or talking to the operators to remind them that there's those conditions. And if the issues continue, we will step up our efforts in terms of our statutory options to take enforcement action.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's no further questions from the gallery, Councillor Grant, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Grant, could you please put your microphone on so the gallery can hear?
Well,
What do you propose, Councillor Grant?
well, I've got an alternative motion to put on the table tonight.
Yes, could you read that?
I shall, and there's quite a bit of the technical jargon that goes with this. That council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a planning permit in accordance with section 61 1C of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 for the planning permit application PIN Act 23010 for the use and development of the land for a service station and food and drink premises. Alteration of access to a road in the Transport Zone 2 and the installation of signage at 22 to 28 Riley Street, Wangaratta on the following grounds. And this is important, that there are grounds. A, that the application does not represent an orderly planning outcome pursuant to clause 65.01 of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme. B, that the application does not address the traffic safety risk associated with the existing road network and intersection at Riley Street and Perry Street, and is in conflict with the policy objectives of clause 18.04/2S roads of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme. The application would result in inappropriate built form and visual bulk that is inconsistent with the surrounding neighbourhood character, particularly to Perry Street and Melbourne Street, and fails to respond to the adjacent heritage precinct to ensure sympathetic development pursuant to clauses 15.01/1S urban design, 15.01/2S building design, and 15.01/5S neighbourhood character of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme. And D, that the application does not represent a compatible land use within proximity to an established residential area and has not provided a suitable design response that incorporates siting and setback objectives for potential adverse off-site impacts pursuant to clause 13.07/1S land use compatibility of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme. And finally E, that the application has not demonstrated that it will not have a detrimental impact on the environment, human health and amenity of the area pursuant to clause 65.01 of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme. And that's my alternative motion.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Fuller as a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Grant, did you want to talk on the recommendation as the mover of that alternate motion?
Look, I've probably said it in what I put in the motion. To me, this development isn't about what we've got there, or what's been in place, but what we would like Wangaratta to look like. And to me, I am not sure, in fact I'm quite certain, that the application was not going to be something that would be an asset to Wangaratta. And that's one of the reasons why I have asked for an alternative motion. It's interesting, the suggestion from some of the people that put forward objections that we approach this with open mind. I can assure everyone that an open mind and
much deliberation was taken in order to reach a decision. This possibly will not be the final part of this. It will go to VCAT. Unfortunately, that probably will be the way it will go. But I think, as a community, we need to demonstrate we don't want it just because it's in our own, not in, it's in our backyards. We don't want it because it's not going to be the right fit for our community going forward. And that was the reason why I was very keen to see the alternative motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Fuller as the seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In supporting Councillor Grant's alternative motion, I reflected on both the pros and cons and weigh up, yes, from an economic development point of view, we do like development in this way, but equally so we need to do it in the right manner and in the right place. And there's a number of opportunities around our community where something like this could go to benefit the greater community. So it's been a backwards and forwards in a thought process, but overall it does reflect both community sentiment but also the practicality of this type of development in the right spot. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any other councillors like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Bussell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to speak against this motion because I've spent the great part of my life working on this corner in the Ampol Servo across the road where Hungry Jack's is now, and 20 years of bow repairs, regularly open till midnight, working there, and all hours of service calls, up to 20 trucks a day. And we never ever had any traffic problems whilst I was there. There was no noise problems, there was no traffic problems. And so something is going to get built on this site, there's no questions about that. And I think that it would work, and so I'm speaking against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to talk on Councillor Herring?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. I'm kind of split on this one. While I personally regard the proposal to be of provide little net community benefit, I don't think it would provide net community benefit, as my personal opinion, based on there being the lack of a need for another fuel service station in this town, and what's most likely going to be a junk food outlet. Don't think we need it. However, I recognise that in the case law that they're not strong grounds to oppose an application upon. And I'm ultimately not of the view, putting planning lens on, I'm not of the view that this is an inappropriate use in the commercial 1 zoning, even with respect to its environs. With the planning scheme that we do have, now, I certainly would be a proponent of welcoming strategic review of the planning scheme to set it up so that it's got stronger grounds to support refusal of such developments in the future and do that in a strategic manner. But while I say it's not an inappropriate use, in close proximity to sensitive uses, it raises concerns. I think it requires a best practice approach with regard to the planning scheme clauses like 34.01(2), which talks about limiting the noise, vapour, airborne emissions, etc., and the impacts off-site. The proposal in its current form does not deliver adequately in this regard. The proposal that is recommended by officers and the planning proposal doesn't adequately deliver in that regard. I don't think it has the mitigation in place. I don't think the conditions will deliver the mitigation that's required. Some questions raised issues around how you're going to police some of these amenity, noise, vapour issues off-site. They're variable over time. They're difficult to measure. They're going to be really difficult to enforce. So I think there needs to be more a different built response, like an acoustic barrier perhaps. For the noise aspects, there could be vapour regulation. There are vapour regulation systems which can take up almost all of the noxious petrol vapour fumes that will impact on the sensitive uses nearby. Unfortunately, such conditions haven't been put on it, and I'm aware that my time's coming up, Chair, so maybe I should ask for an extension or not.
I'll allow you a little bit longer.
Thank you. So unfortunately, such conditions aren't on the proposal. I'm not confident they're conditions that can be kind of designed by myself in a short period of time ad hoc. They're probably something that's best determined in a forum like VCAT if they haven't been determined by the determining body council. So, well, I can't support the application on those grounds, and I'm therefore going to support Councillor Grant's motion, although I will propose an amendment to that motion. You can just pull that back up, just because I don't feel that the motion comfortably captures those concerns around noise and specific off-site emissions.
I think this motion does. This is a motion to decline the permit. So there is no noise or vapour or anything if the motion gets up. If we refer back to the original recommendation that Director Swart had read out, then I think you could apply an alternate motion. Amendment, sorry.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, no.
Thank you. Sim. Councillor Fitzpatrick, do you have anything you want to add?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I definitely want to voice the same statements as Councillor Grant. I'll support her and Councillor Fuller. But I also just want to thank everyone who did take the time to make an objection. Although sometimes you feel we might not get responses or stuff, we are looking and reading through. So I just want to take the time to say thank you for everyone who did make a submission for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Mayor. It's into the atmosphere. And this decision, this application, I must admit up to dinner time I didn't know which way I was going to vote. I think so it supports Councillor Grant's attitude and come here with an open mind. And the tipping point for me is traffic. When I looked at the application or the report in relationship to what came back from the Department of Transport, I was extremely disappointed. This, and even so, that as Councillor Buzzell said, no worries with traffic over 21 years. We're getting more and more traffic along that area, and I think in my sole thing was the traffic. I'm very sympathetic to the planners trying to handle the other things that within planning, where there's a lot of other emotional things that come into this decision that aren't planning matters. And I stress that, and I can understand that in relationship to what Director Swartz has said. But in being in situations in going down Riley Street and the interreaction to Riley Street with so many ins and outs, particularly that's there now, and how many times I've near missed somebody in a truck or to going into Coles and getting out of Perry Street. I think there's got to be a lot more vision, a lot more studies done, particularly whatever if we're going to endure more traffic to go up that street. Therefore, I'm supporting Councillor Grant's motion, mainly on the traffic situation and the disappointment, and I've said this many times around this table, disappointment of the roads authorities in what their recommendations coming back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. So, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistakes tonight. The responsible authority, or the determining authority, is us 7 councillors when it comes to this decision. Do we want a 7-Eleven in Wangaratta? Absolutely. Just not here. Or any other fuel outlet here on that site. We have a number of growth areas that are screaming out for service stations, convenience stores, food outlets, etc. And as we expand, rather than people driving all the way into the CBD to fuel their car, they could certainly go elsewhere around the CBD. This application doesn't access, as Councillor Benson said, the traffic at an already dangerous intersection and a confusing one with U-turns permitted, access into Perry Street, out of Perry Street, multiple directions, trying to navigate coming across Perry Street, across Riley Street from Perry Street to the KFC area. It's just a nightmare. I'm surprised there hasn't been more accidents. It is our job as community representatives to respect just that respect the community. A service station recently approved, I think the address was 87 to 89 Tone Road. We had 1 or 2 objections. That tells you something. Here we have 60 plus a number of petitions. I believe planners have done their job on what they have to do from the planning scheme or against the planning scheme, and remember this plan stream comes directly out of Spring Street. This is why we have councillors. Let's keep decision making at this level. As we further developed, government tries to take decisions away from council more and more, and we need a strong message to VCAT because the applicants no doubt will take it to VCAT. This is not against the applicants, this is just against a service station or a fuel depot, as it is, or a fuel station in this location. So vote no or vote yes to approve this alternate recommendation. Sounds a bit funny that we're voting yes on the alternate recommendation. And it's a good alternate recommendation and a good case to stand forward to at VCAT from the applicant, and council will fight that decision if it gets up. So that's all I've got to say. I'll hand over to Councillor Grant as the mover of the recommendation.
Beg your pardon, Mayor Rees. I've just reviewed it and I would like to move an amendment. We can deal with that as it comes.
What's the amendment, Joe?
So the amendment would be to add point F to what Councillor Grant read out. And I'll be looking to you, Stephen Swart, maybe for guidance on this. But the application has not provided a suitable design response to ensure it does not detrimentally affect the amenity of the neighbourhood, with particular respect to noise and vapour pursuant to clause 34.01-2.
Councillor Grant, as the mover of the original motion, are you happy to accept that clause?
Look, I am if it strengthens the alternative motion, and I think it does, because, you know, obviously we need to ensure that the alternative motion is all about planning grants, and you know, to ensure that, you know, we've got, you know, the right conditions in the motion. So yep, I'll accept that.
Seconder, Councillor Fuller, you a seconder? Are you happy to second that? Yeah, are you happy to accept it as a seconder?
No, it's just an extra part.
Of, in addition to the current recommendation.
So that was it.
You're happy to accept that too? Yep, and you're happy too. Thank you, Councillor Herring. So, as finishing off, Councillor Grant, did you have anything further to say on the whole recommendation before we put it to the vote?
Well, no, other than to say, you know, this is something that, you know, spend a lot of time thinking about, and I'm hoping that we get a better result than what's been proposed initially. So let's hope that, you know, this alternative motion will deliver on that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, now what we do is put the recommendation to the vote. So, councillors, all those in favour of the alternate recommendation raised by Councillor Grant and seconded by Councillor Fuller, all those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, as I said, if you do want to leave because of the heating here, you're most welcome to stay on for the rest of the meeting, but I understand if you do need to go. So, without further, we might pause for a sec while people decide to go. Thank you, everybody. We'll now move on to item number 15.2, which is the planning application 22/103 service station 22-103 Booraman East Road multi-lot subdivision. And thank you, Director Swart.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council to determine a planning permit application for a stage 37 lot subdivision in Booraman. The application was referred to relevant authorities and notice of the application was given. Council received 16 objections to this application. Officers have undertaken an assessment of the application against the Planning Environment Act and the Wangaratta Planning Scheme and have considered all the objections and the referral authority responses. And the recommendation of the officers is that Council issue a notice of decision to grant a permit, subject to conditions contained in attachment 1. Just to be noted that the recommendation on the screen contains some errors, so the last 5 words of the first line in part 1 should be deleted to correct that.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on this issue? No. Thank you all. Sorry? Yeah, please. Might just, just push that button and we'll say your name. Dave will get up if you want. No? That's it? Perfect. Thanks, sir.
Hello, my name is Martin Cameron. I live at 1610 Booraman Road, Booraman. And thank you to the council for giving me this opportunity to address this meeting, please. There's no one in Booraman except the public who wants this development to go ahead. Not one person. If it does, it will turn Booraman from a little town into a suburb of Wangaratta by 37 lots. At the moment, can you imagine the size of Booraman, the number of people living there? Then all of a sudden, over a period of time, 37 lots, housing lots go in, with say 4 or 5 people in each household. What that's going to do to the ambience of our area and the lifestyle we're used to out there. You're talking about, Councillor Grant and yourself there were saying about you're there to represent what the people want. Well, the people of Booraman don't want this. Simple as that. They don't want it. So that's the guide to what I'm trying to get at. We are not against development. We've never said we are. But there's got to be something that's got to fit with the ambience of the area. And all of a sudden, if you put 37 houses in an area of a town the size of Booraman, what's it going to do to infrastructure out there? The power supply is intermittent at best. Internet's the same, phone signal's the same, all these things. So you're going to put the cart before the horse regarding development. Put the development out there and hope that the power supply companies and all the rest of them, they're going to meet the demands as that goes. What's going to happen regarding all the sewage system, all the septic systems out there, and the groundwater? It's just going to change things all so much. What else have we got? There's been existing drainage issues out there for many years from stormwater. The original concept that was put out by the developers showed they were going to pump the water basically straight out of a retarding basin up Booraman East Road towards the pub and just pump it down the road. Well, water doesn't flow uphill and it's going to backfeed down to that retarding basin. The new proposal shows it going across the back fence and then Sanford Road and then up Booraman Road towards Duffus Road and then down Grants Lane. Is it going to be piped, and I mean enclosed pipe, all the way from the retarding basin to the river? That's not clear. What's going to happen with the existing stormwater issues at the end of Sanford Road where we live that floods every time we get rain? So that floods, so there's going to be a culvert under the Sanford Road. Sorry, that's my alarm for dedication, sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. So is there going to be drainage under Stanford Road heading towards the table drain? Is the table drain going to be put in, going along Burman Road towards Fletcher Bar to take that water away? Or is it going to backfeed and make the flooding even worse on that corner of Stanford Road?
Thanks, Martin. That's a good question, and that will be certainly looked at in the detailed design for the drainage plan, and concerns will be taken in upon approval. Subdivision gets approved, then they've got to certainly get other things approved to compensate for those things, and that's a drainage plan. If the developers, etc., don't want to do that, well then that doesn't adhere to their planning permit conditions, so then it doesn't continue through.
I emphasise my point I made earlier on regarding, you made the statement before about the development has to be within the ambience of the area it's going to, i.e. that service station. A perfect example prior to this, that was voted down because it wasn't going to fit that area. Well, I'm telling you, 37 houses and 37 sheds in a place like Burman isn't going to fit the ambience of that area. You can't eat it too. You can't say no to the development here where road repairs was, and then grab one out of Burman. It's the same thing.
It's not, there's two different issues. You are in a township zone out there, which the zone is classed as township.
I realise that, sir, but 37 houses, that's the point. We had a meeting here earlier on, and I made the statement saying, why not cut, it was originally 46, so 46 houses, 46 sheds, so everyone's going to want a board, so there's 46 boards, that's the original one. So, okay, make it 37, so 37 houses, 37 sheds, 37 balls, 37 treatment plants to go in. That has to affect our area and our lifestyle out there. Okay, I grant it, I accept that it's a development. And I brought it up to them, I said, why not say, double the size of the blocks, cut the number of the houses in half. So why not go back to 23 houses and double the size of the original blocks? They went part of the way and made it 37.
Director Sword.
Yeah, I can just mention that as part of this planning process, many or all of those things that you mentioned before has been considered. So specifically drainage, there's been a fair bit of work going into changing the drainage proposal to try and meet some of the comments that were raised earlier on. You yourself point out that this started off as a 46 lot proposal, and after comments from the community, that has been amended to be reduced down to the current 37 lots, and also the layout of lots and the position of roads and so forth have been changed to try and make sure that the character of the area is considered. The other thing to note is that the proposal is for stage subdivision. So the idea is that you won't have all 37 lots there at the one time. It's going to be a number of lots for every stage. So those matters have been considered as part of the assessment and was included in consideration of this recommendation.
Yes, I'll accept that, but 37 still ends up at 37, no matter how long you strip it out for.
Thanks for your questions, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Craig Wilson. I also live on Borman Road at 1592. When this proposal was first, or the planning was first put forth, and we all had a look at it as a community, there was a couple of glaring things, and one thing was drainage. Still not 100% sure that the drainage situation is sorted. From what we had, excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous. From what we had going forward on the first planning permit was going out, as Martin said, towards the back of the pub, which was then being pumped into someone else's lot. What we now have is a situation where you're pumping it up into Grants Lane and then pumping it out towards the Ovens heritage area, which is a heritage area for a reason. It's a national park area for a reason. And like Martin alluded to, we are also talking about putting in 37, or we will be talking about putting in 37 contained sewage lots on properties. on land that is clad, on land that does flood, and it is not flat. You have been out there yourself. That's a question for you guys. You've been out there yourself. Have a look. It's not flat, like it does suggest in the maps on the planning. It also does not follow what it says in the heat maps that says where the levels are. You're going to be putting blocks directly on top of low areas. My question is, how can you be assured that anything out there is not going to fail and that we're going to end up with sewage being pumped straight into the heritage area, into the ovens, for one, and also won't be flowing into other people's backyards, for two?
Thanks, Craig. Director Sword, do you want to talk about land capability assessment, etc.?
Yeah, so when it comes to treatment of sewage or effluent, the application included the land capability assessment to help us understand the ability of the land to deal with that. And there's some conditions on a permit to require people to install specific systems so that that can be done. The cumulative nature of that is also being considered as part of this. From a drainage perspective, I can confirm that the pathway that you described before is the pathway that is currently proposed. One of the important things to consider with drainage is that as part of this stage of the application, we need to be satisfied that there is a suitable solution available. But then there's also the detailed design stage where the detail of every aspect of that drainage system is then locked in, and we need to approve that before this goes ahead. So there's a further stage where we will have more detail about the drainage system to be approved.
Thank you. Mayor Rees, you mentioned earlier that the Borman Township is a town zone.
Yep, a township zone.
Correct, and I have questioned as to why that hasn't been changed in the past, being that, and with full disclosure, I haven't been out there 2 years myself yet, but when it was brought up to my real estate agent that I was buying into a town zone, even he was surprised that it was a town zone. With that in mind, why wasn't it brought forward when you were having a look at rezoning some of the areas around to maybe bring it in line with places like Peachelbar, which is just up the road, which is a low density zoning situation, and in one of your own documents with your frameworks and your planning frameworks is not suitable for development because of the reason that there is no infrastructure out there. There is no town water, there is no town sewage, and there probably isn't likely to be. Just a question on why that hasn't been looked at or reviewed.
Director Sword.
Yeah, there's a long history of this land being zoned for this type of purpose. It used to be under different names, under different previous schemes. I think under the Wangaratta Shire, there was a slightly different name to the zone, but it's still allowed for this type of subdivision with a permit, so with a permit application just like we are considering today. At the moment within the current planning system, it's called Township Zone, which aligns pretty strongly with the zoning under previous schemes. So there's I guess a history of this land being zoned for this purpose. In talking about the low density residential zone, the types of densities that you would get under the low density residential zone are exactly the types of densities that you would get under the proposal. So the proposal has lot sizes around 5,000 square meters. Low density residential zone would deliver similar sized lots. And that recognizes the fact that there's not reticulated sewage, for instance, in this place, and we needed enough space on the lots to deal with that.
Further to the question then, in relation to, sorry, 1 second. It was in relation to the amenity that's currently out there within Borman itself, and there has been an allocation made, apparently, or it's recommended that there's an allocation made to the council for upkeep, I'm assuming, or for new planning. We're looking at a situation where you were putting in 37 residential homes with what looks to be paths around those, which is fine. But what are we going to do about the B-double routes that are bordering that of East Borman Road and Borman Road? And also the fact that you allude to the resident or the recreational area being the golf course across the road. It has a tennis court, it also has some barbecues. There is no facilities for children. There is also no safety for children to cross that road when there are B-double trucks tearing up and down that road, and I can guarantee you at this stage there is between 20 and 30 trucks a day, and that is just B-doubles, not to mention farm machinery, not to mention farm trucks. There is also no paths around that area. You are talking about a potential issue happening out there. What is the plan with the council going forward and the 5% that you will be getting to benefit Boorman community?
Thanks, Director Swan.
So I think the 5% that you're referring to is what we call our open space contribution. Applicants have a choice between providing the 5% as land or as a cash contribution. In this instance, the option of providing a cash contribution has been taken up, and that aligns with our policies as well, which generally says that unless we have a master plan for an area that sets out open space, we would take the cash contribution and then use that cash contribution to try and improve facilities for the community. One of the things that was changed as part of this proposal, on the back of some feedback from objectors, was connectivity, so things like footpaths that would connect this development to other parts of Boorman, including the Rec Reserve.
Thank you. I just remembered my other point too, and that's gone again. Sorry, I'm not wasting your time, I swear.
That's all right, Craig.
The last point I had was to transport, and the road back into Wangaratta is not of a great state. You also have the sweeping bend that it has huge holes in it. Quite often it has cattle, sheep on the side of the road. That's obviously not your issue, that's somebody else's issue. But it's the safety factor of you're going to be increasing the traffic up and down that road, not to mention buses for school children and also buses for the community. We currently have no infrastructure like that. If you have a look at your other developments which show up in your frameworks and your planning frameworks, which Boorman, by the way, has never ever been mentioned, but you have areas like Tarawinji, Oxley, Moyu just recently. You have other areas around. You also have your northwest corridor and your southern corridors that you're looking at developing. Why all of a sudden now are we looking at a place that, as Martin put it, put the cart before the horse, to put in a 37 lot development, regardless of the time frame? There will be 37 lots out there according to this planning permit or the planning application. Why are we putting that in first without any regard to any of the infrastructure going forward?
So when it comes to roads, the application was assessed in terms of its potential impact on roads, the additional traffic that it might generate. And it was found that the likely additional traffic that this development would generate would be well within the capacity of existing road infrastructure in that location.
I argue that point that it actually isn't currently. It's soft-sided roads. You are talking about people also overtaking B-double trucks or passing B-double trucks. You also have a large contingent, especially around holiday times, weekends, long weekends, of people dragging caravans, people dragging boats up towards Bundalong and other areas up there towards Lake Milawa. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig, for your thoughts.
I can say a few words about that or additional words. As part of the draft planning permit conditions that's proposed in attachment 1, one of the requirements is for a traffic impact assessment report to be produced to provide us more detail with about those aspects, and that will determine whether upgrades to certain intersections, for instance, would be required at that point. It may also inform things like speed zones.
Thanks, Craig, for your time. Yes, John Fordman.
Hi, my name's Ron Miller. I live at 1600 Boorman Road, Boorman. Has council ever had any problems with wastewater systems on other premises throughout our locality?
I'm not sure. It's through our environmental health.
I'm not certain about that specific location, but from time to time we do have issues with things like septic systems and other waste water systems. That gets handled under our environmental health legislation, and if we do pick that up, we have an obligation to take action on that as well. So that's separate to planning, but it's still within council, and we do have a statutory framework that helps us to take action in that place, and in some cases compel people to upgrade their systems.
And would I be correct that this would probably be the largest subdivision involving wastewater systems in the Wangaratta area?
I'm not certain whether it would be the largest. In the Wangaratta and surrounding area, there would be quite a few that would be large. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's certainly one of the larger ones, yes.
Yeah, we've had areas like Hamilton Park over the years, etc., which was large wastewater.
Sorry?
Yeah, out in the Colson Drive area, etc. Land was a bit bigger.
That's the point. The land's a bit bigger, so they're able to monitor it. You've now got this, the septic systems facing onto the swale drains towards the front of the blocks. What happens now if we have excessive rain that floods those into those properties and causes that sewage to go in, the wastewater to go into the swale drains and start pooling in swale drains if the drains aren't properly levelled to fall down into that stage 1 large basin, and then obviously gets pumped out into other streams. What's the council's thoughts in regards to how they're going to manage that if the systems fail? Because obviously they do fail. So what's going to happen when you've got 37 of them and people don't maintain them, which you probably come across that quite regularly. What's going to happen then? We're going to have a bit of an environmental problem, aren't we?
Director?
If that happens, you're right, we will have an environmental problem, but enough assessment has gone into this process to be satisfied that the risk of that happening is pretty low. So part of that is the location of things like effluent fields that stretch not into these drains, but close by. So if the water is drained through the drainage system and it functions as designed, and there should be no risk to that. You're quite right, people do have the obligation to maintain their systems, and sometimes that goes wrong. And when we get reports of that, we take action to make sure that that's rectified.
Yeah. But 37 lots that are quite small, when you're talking the other block, you were saying were larger lots. Why can't this be larger?
No, I'd like to point out, I'll talk about Hamilton Park, as I sold many houses up there over the years. They were all 4,000 square metres. I look at Waldara Drive, all 4,000 square metres on acreage, and where a lot of sewer issues happen were very old systems that weren't put in correctly. There's a lot more checks and balances around how systems are put in nowadays. So I believe that those issues, these are larger blocks, these are 5,000 square metres compared to 4,000. No, it's only 1,000 square metres, but it's a hell of a lot when it comes to septic systems.
Yeah. And how many lots are in that?
I look at Hamilton Park, there'd probably be 40, and I look at just Waldara Drive on its own, there'd be 25 to 30 going up Waldara Drive on each side, and swale drains at both ends, on the front and on the rear of Waldara Drive, and never had an issue.
Footpaths. The footpaths are basically, you're saying they're going to run through the internal road that runs through the subdivision, but they're all going to come out past stage 1 out onto the Borman East Road. The school buses that usually come down near the pub, you're sort of expecting kids to walk out of that subdivision out onto East Borman Road and all the way up there from Sanford Road in. So why hasn't there been a footpath put along Borman Road to protect kids from walking along that Borman Road that is the speeds that come through town? I mean, Highway Patrol would have a field day out there. We get speeds of 130 kilometres an hour come through town at times. People aren't going to slow down even when that becomes a 60 zone, which that's a worse problem in regards to taking the speed. But you're going to have kids walking out of the lots around lots, say lots 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in that stage 3 section. They're not going to walk all the way down the East Road. So why can't there be a footpath put along the Borman Road down towards the pub and towards the recreational and sort of meet up with the other one to reduce the opportunity for kids to walk on the road? Is there a reason why that wasn't put into the plans this time around?
Yep, so that footpath along Burman Road wasn't proposed as part of this, this application. One of the things that did happen during this process is when the application was amended on the back of feedback, pedestrian connection has been addressed, and it does follow the internal roadways. I was just having a look at it. Yeah, there's no reason why somebody from Lot 1 wouldn't follow the internal roadways and the path that connects through to the recreation reserve. It seems to be a fairly direct path compared to the path that you are describing.
Up there near the Seven Road, if I was at that block there on the corner there, I'd walk straight out to Warraman Road and walk down Warraman Road to go to the bus.
Yeah, I accept your view. I'm describing to you how it's being managed within this proposal. That proposal has been assessed by our officers and considered that those linkages are sufficient. In terms of the speeds that you mentioned before, you're quite right. I mean, if the speed limit's exceeded, it's going to be a police matter. I understand that the speed limit in this area is going to be reduced in any case, quite separate from this application. Whether, that stops people from speeding, I'm not sure. That would be a police matter.
Yeah, oh, that's a police matter, but you're putting kids, and they're not going to walk along the grass area in the rain, it's near the swale drains, up on the Warraman Road. They're going to walk along the Warraman Road in traffic with trucks and cars. So by not having that footpath there, if it's going to go through this plan, I just don't understand why they can't have a footpath. I'm not saying a concrete one. It could be a gravel, a bit like your share pathways that you see in rural areas, the area. But I just don't understand why you would not have a footpath running along there for safety reasons for children. I mean, if it comes back and this recording's been recorded, I brought this up at the last meeting. When some child gets hit by a car, families are going to be suing. And why they wasn't able to hook up, and the council shouldn't have to pay for this. This is what the developer has to be paying for.
Thanks, Ray. We'll look into that for the future. We'll also look at the budget and submission council to see if the subdivision goes ahead and forward from there. Thanks for your time.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, did you want to say some questions? Sorry, I'll just get Matt first. Sorry, then. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, on behalf of the applicant, just describe to councillors that we did have a conciliation meeting based on the objections, and we took those objections very seriously, and we did make some significant amendments to the application around drainage, around density. We looked at all the different things, connectivity, and we reduced the initial lot yield from 46 down to 37, taking on board some of the comments of the objectors and some of those concerns. Obviously, with development, it's always difficult to balance the development versus the existing situation and the amenity that people enjoy. But we do take that seriously and try our best to actually. I think Councillor Benton was at the conciliation meeting as well, and he would note the difference between the original plan and the current plan. So I guess there's a couple of things we'd like to thank those people for their input, because I think we've actually got a much better development based on that knowledge and information that was put to us. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll just get you to state your name too. Matt, turn the microphone off, so I might get you to put the microphone back on too. Sorry, Dave. Stephen, sorry. We just want to be able to make sure we hear your questions loud and clear. Thank you.
All right, I'm Cootie O'Keefe at 98 Advisors Road, Warraman. One question. You people are going to make a decision on our community. Do you know where it is? Have you ever been there? Have you seen it? Right, okay.
Yes.
The other one, a footpath, I think it's very important to have that. And on the second plan that they sent out, it said proposed footpath. So does that mean it's going to go in or not?
Director Sword.
Proposal.
Yes, it does mean it's going to go in if this is approved.
Right, okay. And the other open space contribution, you're going to take money. Is that going to be spent on the golf club and the Warraman Recreation Reserve? Because that's where the money's coming from Warraman.
Okay.
Yeah, so my understanding is that that contribution will go into general revenue and will be spent on improvement of facilities for our communities. I'm not sure whether it would be targeted to this community.
It's very disappointing.
Thank you, Kenny. Thanks for your time. it's on and ready. Yep. Just your name, please, sir.
My name's Tim Clayton. I live on Burraman Road as well. And just for a point of clarification, there's quite a lot of undeveloped zoned township land around the Burraman Township. Is there a master plan or anything like that for the Burraman area? So is it council's intention to eventually have all that township land turned into township?
I can't answer that question until an application comes in on any land at the time, but where were we at with the master plan on that?
So there is no master plan for the Burraman area, as you pointed out. So at this stage, there's no plans to change the zoning in that area.
So could it expand in the future if someone owned the land and wanted to do more? It all comes down to an application, and that might be looked at differently to how this one is too. So, yeah.
Okay. So as far as getting a master plan for Burraman goes, is that something the council, the community can put forward to the council, or is that something the council has to organise?
Stephen?
So master plans generally are done as a matter of priority. So we've got a number of rural locations that might need planning, and we would have a program of work to go through that, matching our resources available for that type of thing. At this stage, Burraman's not on that list at all. The community could make submissions and ask council to prioritise that, and through our budget processes we could fund work like that, yes.
Yeah, especially with the township looking to increase maybe.
Just want to mention, along with Marty mentioned before, is that we're not against the development as such, or development in general, but we believe this development is too large for this area.
Thanks, Tim. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there's no more questions, I'll look to council for someone to move the recommendation, get it on the table. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Benton, are you happy to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, and a seconder, please. Councillor Fuller, to second the recommendation.
I'll second it to open debate.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Benton, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. And I have come to the conclusion to support the recommendation because, and I know very well of the water out there. I think I've been directed around that Burraman area by past councillors, past owners of ground out there when the floodwaters have hit. After meeting with the officers just recently, along with the mayor, it satisfied me that some of the works in relationship to the drainage will ensure, and it says in the report, ensure some of the flooding that is happening now to handle that flooding. The thing that I'm going to say is that 110% effort on the applicant and the council to make sure that the community is brought along with this development in relationship to the drainage system, because it is not going to have to be able to have an ongoing issue around water, because there's more problems out in water in Burraman than worrying about the dry. The issue around about the town plan, and I'll stand corrected, but I think we have a town plan design coming forward, if not in the next year, it'll be in the year following for the Burraman area. And it will take years, some time for all that to come together, but it is the initiative to make sure that you, the community, get behind this and make sure that you're heard in relationship to what you want out there. I have tried my best to make sure that things have done to the best of my ability for the Burraman area, but it still comes back to the community to make sure. And I know, Malcolm, I'm not going to, but the development will enhance this council to make sure that the developments that you talk about do happen. And e.g. the path down to the footpath. Springers is an area where we're still trying to get that done in relationship to kids walking on the road. But it all comes back to one thing: cruel, corruptible dollars. And with this development, I think it is taken into care with all the concerns in relation to the septic systems, ensuring that the ground level is above, well above what is there now in the flood area. Now, I understand that water will move very quickly in this subdivision when we get a rain. But the trouble with Booramin is it's not necessarily the water that falls on you, it's the water that runs to you. And it probably come out of my property, most of it, that gets down to you, and that's what we've got, and it's been allocated in the report to make sure the external flows are taken care of. And in relationship to the drainage back to that, it has been, the design's not done, but I'm pushing for and making sure it does happen, that it's a pipe system, not a swale drain that takes the excess floodwater away. And it just doesn't stop at Grants Lane, the intersection there, because that's 1/3 of the access to the Ovens River, that the northern part of the river, of the Ovens River, access to the river. There's only 2 other accesses on the northern side in my area, out in the northern ward. So I'm making sure that that roadway isn't impeded at all. In relationship to the Grants Lane, I was out there last weekend and I had a look at the Grants Lane. There is a depression there. One reason why I don't particularly enjoy the idea of a swale drain down that road to encompass what the water, because it's not going to get so far and pool. And so much so for the same one was, in the original plan where it would pool and stop in Keats Lane or Lewis's Lane. So I think your developments there under the planning scheme, it's very hard to knock it back on planning grounds. And it's all very well to say what we've done with the 7-Eleven. We've done that, and we've done it, in my opinion, on traffic lanes. And I know that you're going to say about the B-doubles, and I have been pushing for years to try and get the shoulders being done, but it gets back to money. And I think the more people that you possibly get there, and you people live there, you come there to live there as well. And it to me will be some of the aspects of trying to get rid of some of the water that you people are suffering at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to talk? Councillor Grant, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm actually going to speak against the subdivision. This is a hangover from the old Shire days, the township zone, and I think it just smacks to me of disorderly planning. The actual subdivision probably is too large. I think to move out there without all the other amenities that you require to have an appropriate lifestyle are just not there. And so I'm going to vote against it simply because I see it as disorderly planning, and I think that's what we in the little city, I believe we need to avoid that. And for that alone, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to talk? Councillor Fuller, please, first, and then Councillor Herring.
In light of F and G before, where we added on, I wonder if I could add to the recommendation, Mr Mayor? And if this is the opportunity to do so?
Sure.
I'd like to add at point 3 that we get a report produced to us as part of our budget consideration for that footpath inclusion potentially, or a similar review of bus stop facilities in the area in regards to better options potentially for this development in the future.
Sure, we could add that to as a condition to just investigate that further. That's what you're asking?
It would be an internal conversation or a condition for the applicant, I believe.
Right.
It's about us working out
Okay,
what that cost
sure.
will look like.
Well, we're at budget submission time now, so we'll put budget submission in for it.
Yep. As an internal budget submission, as part 3, sorry.
Councillor Benton, are you happy to add that as an addition to the original recommendation? It's just to put put in there for consideration into a budget submission during our council budget submission time now to improve that footpath connectivity.
I'm just going to ask Council, Director Scott, can that be a condition on a permit?
The draft conditions that's recommended by the councillors are included in the report. We also have to be sure that any conditions that we add to a permit is linked to a specific development so that it's defendable at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal if it went in that direction. In this case, it sounds like Councillor Fuller is asking not for a condition to be added to the draft conditions, but for a point to be added to the recommendation.
Correct, because the condition would put the onus back on the developer, which is
That's
what we're
correct.
trying, which he's not trying to do.
Yeah, I'm okay with that then, that's a good explanation.
Sorry, who was the seconder for that? You were, yeah, okay. Correct. Yep. Yes, the mover has accepted. The seconder was Dave, who moved the amendment, so I need another seconder. Councillor Fitzpatrick to second. Again? Yep. As an amendment too. So we're now dealing with the new notice motion with that amendment. So are you happy to talk now, Jeff?
I'll vote first on the amendment, whether you
Or
want
not? No, on the whole lot, including that.
Whether or not the amendment's included as part of the motion. If it's approved, it will become part of the motion. It's not then we'll revert back to what it was.
on the amendment. We vote as a substantive motion.
Rightio. I'll put that to council later. All those in favour of including the amendment in the recommendation? And the recommendation is carried, so we'll move back. That is now the official recommendation with that addition. So, Councillor Herring, Councillor Fuller, did you want to talk any further? No, Councillor Herring.
Yeah, so I'll speak to the substantive motion. Yeah, so I guess I acknowledge that this land was zoned that way a long time ago. And maybe it shouldn't have been zoned that way a long time ago. Maybe in the interim, since back then and now, today, it should have been changed. It certainly will be a significant transformation if this planning application were approved tonight and development goes ahead as per the plans, notwithstanding all the pending conditions and work to be done. I acknowledge there has been concession in the number of lots and work between the proponent and some of the objectors, taking it down from 46 to 37. That was a really big talking point. I was also in on that mediation session with Councillor Benton. And the change to the drainage plans and issues, which I believe Wangaratta has had some experience with poor drainage and poor septic areas and problem areas in the past, problem developments, particularly lower density areas with septics. But I do think there has been reasonable work done on those, and I think learnings have been taken from the past. I certainly agree with the concerns put forth around infrastructure, roads, telecommunications, footpaths, the water out there, both with respect to drainage but also pulling water out of the ground. Ultimately, I think that's why big picture, and this comes back to why the land is zoned the way it is zoned, I think big picture we really need to be more proactive in recognising the significant downsides of this sort of development. Remote locations, townships without a master plan, townships clearly without a great deal of planning and an orderly kind of planning at that strategic level. Having said that, I feel like to refuse this application at this point in time is probably not an orderly approach to amending those past errors. I think without planning scheme amendments, and it's something that we probably should have had on the radar, that it would be on pretty weak grounds from a planning perspective. So as such, I think I will be supporting the motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation? Councillor Russell? No? Councillor Benson, would you like to finish off, please?
Thanks, Mayor Reeves. Yes, I still understand the applicants, or not the applicants, the objections here tonight. I will say that I'm probably one of the persons sitting in the room that might be in trouble, because that is probably been sitting around the council table. I might have been in the room when this thing was voted on to be a township back in the village areas back in the 80s. So I can be hung, drawn and quartered later, I suppose. But I will say this, Millora is in the same situation 20 to 40 years ago. Pizza Bar was exactly the same. And I think it was 30, 40 years ago, because I was the first person to sell a block of land in Pizza Bar. It had no water. And I can remember the time, my boss told me at the time, if you can sell a block of land in Pizza Bar, you'll be able to sell anything going forward. So it's all, we've got to be able to accept that is a township zone, and I think we've got a good chance to make sure it's better than what you've got at the moment, because you're suffering with water at the moment, and I think it's a big opportunity to make sure that the problems you've got now can be alleviated and not enhanced. I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. That finishes the debate on this topic. So I put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. We'll now move on to planning item 15.3, which is the application 23148 Merrill Park, 66 Riley Street, Wangaratta, review of native vegetation. Thank you. Thank you, Director Swart.
Thank you. This report is about a planning permit application to remove 3 native trees in Merrill Park. The application was referred to the relevant authorities, and public notice of the application was given in accordance with our statutory requirements. At the time of writing this report, 4 objections were received, and having undertaken an assessment of the application against the Planning Environment Act and the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, and having considered the public submissions and the responses from referral authorities, officers are of the view that the application is consistent with the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, and recommend that Council issues a notice of decision to grant the permit, subject to the conditions in attachment 1.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on this issue, on this point, please? Thank you. Come forward, Claire. Just again, Claire, would you put the microphone on and state your name?
Sure. Claire Russell. Thanks very much. So I was one of the objectors to the application. I just have a couple of questions around, because I'm feeling very confused around this process, how these 3 trees that are listed for destruction were declared safe and at no risk in the QTRA in November 22. So number 97 tree, that was listed as no work required. Number 114, there was remedial work to enlarge the cutout, a priority for high maintenance. And number 152, no work required. So I'm confused, is the latest assessment, how does that override the first assessment you do? And how can these trees in November 22 go from safe and no need for concern to being destroyed? There's either a dodgy process or, I don't know, it's very confusing.
Certainly. Director Goonan, did you want to answer these questions?
I'm happy to answer these again, Dean. Thanks for your question, Claire, and I think we've been over it a number of times now, so apologies if I continue to repeat myself. Essentially, the 2 risk assessments that you're talking about are different risk assessments, and they're utilised for different reasons. QTRA just looks at tree health only, and doesn't take into account the implications on existing infrastructure.
That's wrong.
Yeah,
Excuse me, don't call out from the gallery. You've got your time to ask a question. You can answer it, so be quiet. Thank you. Thank you, Director.
Thanks. doesn't take into consideration infrastructure in the way that it is within that particular park itself. So, and also doesn't take into consideration the way the community uses the park, nor what our future plans for the park are. As you can see, as we've gone through the process, we have continued to utilise that risk assessment process, and it is the process that is spelt out and laid out in our adopted urban tree management plan. We have gone from 10 trees in the original assessment as being extreme down to 3. We've continued to work through that. We've utilised all of our expertise, both internally and externally, to continue to assess these. These are the 3 trees that are still considered an extreme risk at that point in time based on our risk assessment. These are the 3 trees that have been put forward for removal.
Okay, so I'll step down and someone else might want to ask a question to clarify.
Thank you, Claire. Please come forward, state your name too, sir.
My name is Simon Russell. In the urban tree plan, it says that council is supposed to follow a QTRA approach with tree risk and tree removal. The QTRA report didn't recommend removal as the risk was very low. That was back in 2022. Have they done a QTRA risk assessment since then that's changed that? Because the urban tree plan says we will follow a QTRA approach in assessing tree risk. You followed a QTRA approach. It said there was very little risk, and now the other approach is not a QTRA approach, so it's not consistent with the urban tree plan.
Thanks for your question. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Simon,
sorry. I don't have the urban tree plan in front of me, but
It was sent. In the objections we referenced this part of the urban tree plan. This wasn't mentioned in the council response in the permit section of response to the objections. It doesn't mention anything about, there is a section that says we'll follow a QTRA approach.
Okay, can we let Marcus answer the question?
Yep, so I don't have the urban tree plan directly in front of me, but I certainly know that from reading through it, going off my memory, it definitely mentions the QTR approach, and then it also mentions that council will overlay its own risk management process on that, and that is what we've followed.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
One more.
Yep.
Just given the significance of a park like Merriwell Park, these are parks that are unique to this country, really. If you go look around the world, they do not have River Red Gum parks of this style, this look. Those trees are huge. They're, I don't know the exact age, they're 150 years old, lots of them. Given that there's no, it's come up before, there's no sort of significant tree there's none of those trees are, I don't think any of them are, registered as significant trees. Given the importance of a park like that, it's used for public events, it's very significant to people in this community, would council consider not approving removing the trees and instead going ahead with looking at Merriwell Park and putting trees under a significant tree register, or considering them as significant assets for the community?
Director Goonan.
I'll leave the bit about whether council's going to approve the planning application as it currently stands. As far as the significant tree register, I implore the rest of the community to come forward with trees that they believe are significant so we can expand our register. It's a conversation that I've had with at least one councillor sitting around the table about the fact that it is something we need to look into in the next year. Yep. Thank you, Councillor Harry. And getting more trees on that, because we do understand that it is lacking, for want of a better word, a number of significant trees right through the municipality, not just Merriwell Park.
Thank you, Simon. I'd just like to rebut one of your claims there, stating that some of those trees, I believe, down by the river, etc., could be 150 years old with the soil. But the ones inside of Merriwell Park, I have seen pictures of a fellow by the name of Ray Dunstan removing all the trees back in the 50s and 60s, and I've seen pictures of the park cleared, or a lot of the park cleared. So there's probably one or two in there, but the majority were cleared and then replanted again. So yes, they could be 60 to 70 years old, but 150?
Those are 60, they're, but, well, I'm not a tree expert, but those are all the...
I'm not either. I'm just saying from the photos, I'm certainly no tree expert.
I've planted a red Varroa gum. I know Varroa gum from 30 years ago, and they're not that big, and they're not 60, you know.
They're still 60 or 70 years old.
Well, not all of the trees are removed. It doesn't say that in the report, and I haven't seen photos like that. Those trees, I've definitely seen photos of the entrance, and the trees are there, still there.
Okay.
Those photos in the 20s.
All right, we'll get back to the planning permit now and the requirements there. So if there's no further questions,
I have one more, because I only did one. So my question to council is, does council follow the past Victoria River Red Gum Parks Management Plan of 2018?
Director Goonan, do we follow that rubric?
I'm not aware, unfortunately, Dean. I would need to take that question on notice.
Yep.
So I would highly encourage council to be aware of that plan. Parks Victoria have put a lot of work into that management plan. The River Red Gums over in Shepparton are part of that management plan, and I think our trees deserve to be part of that management plan, because what really concerns me now is my lack of confidence in assessments being done on those trees. And so another one comes down and we go, oh, we'll have to assess them again. Oh, look, we need 3 more to go. And before we know, we could have had 12 gone. So, you know, I'm not, I feel proud of the work that a small group of people did in putting some pressure on council, but I'm seriously worried that more trees could be deemed unsafe and go against a QTRA assessment. So.
And I'm proud of the work that council's done to reduce that from 10 or 12 trees down to 3. So thank you, Director. So we'll put if there's no further questions, we'll put the recommendation for a mover for the recommendation. Can I have a mover, Councillor Bustle, and a seconder, please? Councillor Benton, sorry, Councillor. Councillor Bustle, did you want to talk on the trees?
Not very much, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but the safety of the people is just absolutely paramount here. And just to add, while I can, that the trees in Merrill Park, the majority of them are no more than 90 years old, and that's been factually checked with more information.
And that's a huge age.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Herrick, did you want to talk on the recommendation? Please.
Thank you, Marys. Yeah, I'll be speaking against the motion that's on the table. It largely relates to an underlying lack of confidence in the risk appraisal process. I did touch on this historically when the urban tree plan was considered. I'll just point out that I have a difference of opinion with Director Goonan's assessment of what the quantitative tree risk assessment tool is. It certainly does assess targets. It assesses the frequency those targets are within the vicinity. It assesses that the potential impact, consequence from the tree. It's all about trying to take a structured approach to risk assessment. Just regarding this process, so regarding this decision, Rural City of Wangaratta is the determining authority. So we're making a decision on a planning matter today. Rural City of Wangaratta is also the proponent, making an application for a certain planning outcome. Rural City of Wangaratta is also the body who has procured the tree risk assessment from our internal work crews. We've opted not to go out for an external third-party assessment.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Yes. The conversation's now gone away from what we have on the table as a motion. It's leading into a debate around the conflict of interest.
And perhaps
Yes.
taking the argument in a very personal way, which I don't like.
Yeah, so off topic on that, Councillor, talk about either the removal of the trees or the non-removal, supporting the recommendation or not supporting the recommendation.
Okay, so
You're talking about the assessment around it?
So I am talking about the assessment. So I raised what I raised because I do wonder why we didn't go external and seek an external risk assessment for this decision, just to remove one of those elements of while I acknowledge it's not a conflict which compromises council's position to make this decision.
It's not a conflict, so we don't need to talk about conflict. You're referring to conflict, so let's not talk about it because it isn't. So let's move on.
I just think it would have been nice to have a different approach to the risk assessment and to have a third-party assessment backing up the application to remove these trees based on the risk they pose. Unfortunately, Director Goonan's out of the room at the moment, so I can't put a question to him right now, but I'm not confident that council has done an assessment in terms of like the harmonic dampening that occurs in trees. So if you're doing tree reductions, and we did tree reductions in lieu of removing a few other trees, canopy reductions, or if you're removing trees, they're exposed to different forces, different wind forces that they haven't been exposed to in their 90 years of life. So maybe I'll put the question to Marcus Goonan, Director Goonan now. Have we assessed...
Actually, you've gone over your time, so,
Councillor Airy, I will allow you to ask that question because you did want to ask it when Director Goonan was out, so I'll give you some scope. Please ask the question.
Thank you. So Director Goonan, the question is just how extensive has the risk assessment been, and has it assessed the risk of removal and reduction of these trees with respect to harmonic dampening? Trees are incredibly complex structures and they have complex responses to wind forces and other forces.
100% agree, and it's certainly taken into consideration, and hence why we have taken the approach we have of not just starting with the 10 trees that we originally noted as being potentially damaged, as being extreme through the risk assessment process. So we take that into account. There's obviously other factors, as you rightly point out, such as the fact that that area is consistently irrigated and things like that, that also play into the safety and the stability of all of those trees in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Airy. Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I actually shouldn't have to say this, but I actually have the utmost of confidence in Director Goonan and the work that he's done in Merrill Park with the trees, and I've had a long working relationship with him and in consultation with him around what would happen to the trees, and we started with 10 for removal, and we've come down to 3. I find it quite extraordinary that we're always talking about outsourcing the things that council does. We've got people within the organisation with the expertise. It may not be exactly what people are happy with, but it's the best that we have, and I think we need to applaud that. And it's been a long and difficult process, and safety and council's risk responsibilities have driven this whole process. I think it's okay to say, well, trees don't fall down or they don't hurt people. Well, they do, and we had to think about that, and we had to take that into consideration. And while I certainly don't want to see trees removed, I think we've taken a measured approach, and I think that the team on council have done a very good job in doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Are there any other councillors who'd like to talk to the recommendation? Just who was the mover was Councillor Bussell. Councillor Bussell, did you want to talk to the recommendation again? It's finishing off.
No, it's been enough said, Mr.
I think I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you. Director Swart, still 15.4, which is Youth Council Advisory Committee in 2024. Please.
Thank you again. This report is about our Youth Council. Council's Youth Council, or Youth Council Advisory Committee, as it's known, provides a voice for young people to engage with council and also our community. Recently, we invited applications for the 2024 Youth Council Committee, and we received 18 applications for that. At the time of writing this report, 2 of those applicants had withdrawn their application, and more recently, a further 1 applicant withdrew their application. So that leaves 15 applications left, and officers recommend that council appoints all 15 of those applicants onto the Youth Council.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on the Youth Council? No. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Fitzpatrick, of course, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Fitzpatrick, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I just feel that it's fantastic that we've had originally 18 applicants for Youth Council. It just shows how much advocating our previous Youth Council have done to really put the word out there and encourage young people to be part of the conversation. And I'm quite proud that the Royal City of Wangaratta actually does have a Youth Council to advocate and empower our young people to make decisions around the table with us. So, yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Any other councillor like to talk? Councillor Fuller, please.
Echoing Councillor Fitzpatrick and acknowledging the work of the officers, Bree, Rach, Brady, and anyone else that I've missed, I apologise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Any other councillors? No? I'd just like to point out that the Youth Council was struggling at one stage in the last 12-18 months, and now to see more numbers coming on, it's a great thing and shows that youth want to have a say in the political field and see what they can do to better the community, and especially in that youth space. So huge congratulations to our team for getting more people involved, as well as the previous Youth Council. Councillor Fitzpatrick, did you want to end off? You happy? Yes, no, yep, of course, yep. You've got nothing to say before we put the recommendation? Well, okay, we'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Councillor Fitzpatrick, could you please mention some names?
Yes. You want me to read out our successful young people's names?
And you can mention the people who are getting off, and a big thank you to them as well, please, Councillor.
So first I'd like to congratulate Ayushma Girmaya, Kayla Jose, Toby Beggs, Adele Webber, Amity Turnbull, Bonnie Lee, Ruby DeFazio, Lucas Ryder, Sway Franklin, Krista Lovemore, Atticus Carter, welcome back Lainey Evans, Lukey Wilsonson, Edward Brown and Harrison Allen. And I'm quite impressed with the diversity of schools that we have here. And I also would like to take the opportunity to thank our outgoing youth councillors, Bailey Jenkin, Finn Vigel, Lewis Pye, Lucy Sinclair and Turner Pearson. We truly appreciate your time and dedication, empowering your peers and advocating to us at council. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we all know you have a very bright future ahead. So I just want to say thank you to those.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. So we'll move on now. We've got to item number 17, which is advisory committee reports, and 17.1 is the annual committee performance assessment results. And this is purely for noting that the recommendation is that council notes this report. And if there's no questions from the gallery on this report, I'll look for a mover, Councillor Herry, and a seconder, Councillor Benton. If there's no councillor to talk on the recommendation, Councillor Herry.
Just briefly, I guess, to acknowledge that some opportunities for improvements did come through in the comments, but it's overall a favourable reflection on the performance of the Audit and Risk Committee, and that provides some confidence. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Herry. There's no other council. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the report is noted and carried. We'll now move on to, there's no further minutes of advisory committees, but there is a notice of motion which is 19.1. It's notice of motion number 68 by Councillor Herry. Councillor Herry, could you give us a brief summary?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. So I provide this as background to notice of motion number 68. This notice of motion arises from a position that, while respecting it is a long-standing tradition, regards the inclusion of the opening prayer in council meetings as a custom whose review is overdue. Our community is changing and is doubtless a very different one today than it was when this custom of opening council meetings with a prayer was instituted. Hence, the intent of this notice of motion is to bring about a debate on the appropriateness of continuing with the practice of the opening prayer in its current form with respect to our contemporary and diverse community. I welcome the support of my fellow councillors to engage in debate and work toward a resolution. Thank you, Mayor Rees.
Thank you. If there's no questions from the gallery, I will raise a couple of questions that have been raised by the general public. Question number one is Pauline Noncrease asked the following questions for the council meeting 6 p.m. The question is addressed during a discussion matter on this question. In reference to motion number 19 on the prayer of council meetings, in response to requests from the community, many local government associations, including Bundoora, have removed the prayer from council meetings. In fact, doubts have even been raised recently about its legality. As the rural city of Wangara is becoming an increasingly multicultural community, would council consider acknowledging this as a tangible way by removing the secretarial prayer from its monthly meetings? Thank you, Pauline, and obviously this discussion is based around, I'm not sure if this came in beforehand, but this is where this discussion will be raised tonight once the recommendation gets on the table to see if it will stay or be removed. Question number 2 is from Anne Dunstan, asked the following questions for the meeting today. Question 1 is, where is this report or preamble for this motion? In this motion based on personal belief, or has the community approached Councillor Herry to put this motion forward? Councillor Herry, are you happy to answer this question?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess with respect to the first part, where is the report or preamble for this motion, I do concede that in the past, notices of motion have often had a background or preamble. If there is no specific instruction in the governance rules that indicate there needs to be, but in hindsight, I think it's beneficial for them to have one, and as such it was agreed by councillors that I would read that introduction. I did read. With respect to, is the motion based on personal belief or has the community approached me? So I don't work at the behest of community to put specific motions on the table, although it's certainly numerous conversations and engagements with community members over the years have certainly flagged this as an issue that many people are sometimes unaware that there is a prayer as part of the meetings, but when they're aware of it, they've raised concerns about that appropriateness. With respect to personal beliefs, I bring my personal opinion and experiences and lived experiences to this matter, as I do with any matter, but it's certainly not the only thing that is driving this notice of motion. It's a combination, to make it short. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Question 2 was, could council consider removing the acknowledgement in country at each council meeting and reserve it for special events or for functions only? I'd just like to point out, and thank you, Anne, for the question. This is not part of this recommendation, but it could come back for discussion at further if council seeks fit. So I think we'll leave that one at that. So if there's no other questions from the gallery, Jack, you are the mover of that recommendation.
Well, I will now.
Yes.
Invitation.
Great, thank you. You're the mover of that recommendation, and I will second that recommendation to get it onto the table for discussion. So, Jack, as the mover of the recommendation,
sorry, just before you, yes, I'll move the recommendation as it appears in the agenda with the addition of a third item, and the third item is that the preamble or the background I read be included in the minutes. So if you'll second that one.
Yes, I'm happy for that to be noted in the minutes. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Councillor Harry, for your preamble and moving the motion. I look forward to your comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rees. So I put it to my fellow councillors that the inclusion of the opening prayer in council meetings is inappropriate on a number of grounds. I feel that the government of a diverse community is best served by leaving religion out of its formal proceedings. I feel removal of this religious observance practice would be the most neutral path to take going forward. hence the form of the current notice of motion on the table, which proposes the removal, the cessation of observing the prayer. However, I just want to make it clear for my colleagues that I enter this debate with an open mind, and I see many potential resolutions to the core of some of the controversies that I'm going to raise. And I know that you won't doubt me in my intentions on that, given I did bring forth 2 weeks ago a number of options for an opportunity for us to discuss those. So while I acknowledge the opening prayer as a long-standing tradition, I do not believe that just because something is long-standing, it is beyond review and having its appropriateness raised as a point of debate. But in saying that, I just really want to make it clear and assure everyone that by questioning this particular religious practice in this specific forum, I in no way intend to cast aspersions on any individual, on any individual's faith, or the integral institutions of faith within our very community. When I step into a place of worship, be it across the road at the Anglican Cathedral or in temples internationally in India or in Japan, I take no issue with participating wholeheartedly in the rituals of observance of those religions in those places. I've personally gained from my experience in many of those places. However, in this forum, a very distinct forum, I maintain my views that it is not an appropriate practice to continue. As our community grows increasingly diverse, we need to constantly reflect upon our governance practices and formalities to ensure that those practices and formalities reflect the diversity of the community and don't pose as potential barriers for participation. So I'll just touch on 3 points of issues I see with the current situation. So first, by reciting the religious prayer, it mixes religion and government in a formal way. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that's an issue. Second, it gives favour to a single religion, thereby losing a neutral approach to religion. I think that's an issue. And finally, the practice is not supported by any particular legislation or regulation. I would say my proposal to cease the practice is to simply stop reciting the prayer, thereby removing religion from the formal proceedings and separating our governance such that it reflects a diverse community and doesn't place favour upon a single religion. And it would solve the problem, as I said, with providing preferential treatment. The advantages of this proposal are that we'll create a more diverse and universally welcoming space, and the proceedings for our decision-making forum here will be more inviting to a broader, diverse community. And they'll do that by not demonstrating that preferential treatment for just one religion. We won't be asking people or requiring people to participate in religious observance by entering this forum. And we also won't be putting it upon individuals and others to take convoluted approaches to avoiding participating in those religious observance practices. So I guess just to close, before I let others speak, so some evidence that this is a viable pathway. Not all councils partake in the prayer. A number of councils have removed it, some of those on legal advice. So I think the questioner referenced one council. And many jurisdictions indeed have separation of religion and matters of government and decision making for the broader community. So I think the path has been paved well and truly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Would other councillors like to talk to the recommendation? Councillor Grant, please.
I'll speak against it.
Okay.
This is clearly a very personal opinion that Councillor Herry has, and I consider the discussion about the council prayer as probably one of the least important discussions that we need to have as a council, and I'm actually mystified as to why we're even having this debate. Last time I looked, both state and federal government sittings continue to have a prayer as part of the opening agenda. And I think this speaks profoundly to the essence of Australia as a community, secular, but predominantly Christian. And being inclusive and referencing diversity, which we've had that reference today, means including as many people as possible and not simply pandering to a minority who seek to dismantle a system because it might seem progressive. In all our decision making, we should aim to unite, not divide. And while this may seem a small and fairly unimportant issue, it may also be the beginning of other more significant changes to traditions that we hold important, like Christmas Day, Easter, Australia Day, Anzac Day, well, the list goes on. The prayer is a tradition that has been part of local government meeting agendas for more than 100 years. And to me, and I think this is important to note, that this is a simple invocation that speaks as much to the inner spiritual God than to any higher or exclusive being. God essentially is who you want them to be. Much deeper than that, the prayer also represents a tradition, a symbol of our cultural framework that forms the base of our government's structures. And from a personal perspective, going on the numbers in the ABS data and the various conversations I've had in recent weeks, retaining the prayer is still a majority. And in fact, most people have questioned what and why this issue is even being considered. Haven't we got better things to do?
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Bussell, did you have something to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I came to council in 2016 for the understanding procedures, protocols. I don't like everything we do in council, but I respect what we do. More than 50% of my constituents identify as Christians. Some have expressed to me that the prayer as it is, it must stay. Our council has values written on the bottom of everything that we have, and they are trust, respect, excellence, enjoyment, fairness and openness. And I think this matters a motion misses at least 3 of these values. So I can't go against the majority of my constituents. I vote no.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Benton, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, when this was first muted, the first thing that comes to my mind is why, and everyone I've asked since is why. Because the very foundation that we're having this debate, or the very reason we can have this debate in this country, is because of the Christian faith. Whether you adhere to that faith or not, I still think that the little time that it takes to have a prayer, just to have some sort of spiritual guidance, is very important. Especially in these times, and I don't think there's anyone in the room that sometime in their life is going to have to ask for something that you've lost control of, and that's usually when you've come against something that you've loved and died. It is not particularly for everybody to explain how that happens, but it is there. And for this prayer to be just to be able to give us some guidance and give some sort of foundation that the very mention of the Westminster system is based around the Christian faith is the fact that I think we should just show some sort of little recognition to that going forward. And I think if we keep chiseling away at all these things, what's next? And that's what worries me about the 2 parts of this motion. If this motion gets up, it says to get rid of the prayer, the next one is to review the prayer. Well, if I've ever seen anything that was said here tonight, the cart before the horse, well, that's certainly the cart before the horse. Going forward, you start doing those things, you'll end up in more trouble. The issue in relation to the legality of it, I find a little bit strange because there's 2 acts. One's called the Oath and Reformation Act of Victoria, and the other is the Schedule Act that sits in the Constitution that refers to oath and affirmation, and both of them make a comment to the monarchy. And whether you like the way the individual monarchy behave, but you've got to understand the ways that the monarchy was created goes back to the Christian faith. So whether you do the affirmation or not, it's embedded in our constitution, it's embedded in our Act of Parliament, and it's also embedded in our Local Government Act, because if you don't take that, you're out, within 3 months of election, you're out the door. And I'll just say that there's been two other...
Point of order, Mayor. Yeah, so it doesn't relate to the affirmation or oaths of affirmation, the motion, and so I'm not quite sure.
I'm talking about the monarchy.
And my motion doesn't relate to the monarchy.
I know it doesn't relate to that, but the monarchy relates to the Christian faith.
It does the Anglican faith. So on the point of order, I'll rule that you can continue, Councillor Benton, because I believe...
I'll just close by saying there's greater minds than mine and think it's not perfect, but by gosh, it's a damn sight better than anything else that's out there. And the one iconic Australian, if you listen to his song, is "This Old World's Got a Boss." Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst I support elements of this conversation and the fact that it's opening the debate, I look forward to seeing how it actually transponds into the community in terms of debate and in lieu of formal consultation or a more formal channel of consultation with our community. It does become a conversation within ourselves to acknowledge where we take guidance from. So whilst it may be God for some of us, for others it's not so clear cut or A or B in this instance.
Councillor Fitzpatrick. Thanks, Councillor Fuller.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The other question I have for Jack is why now? Why the debate now, not when you first got elected on council?
You happy to answer that now? We'll wait till your closing.
Yeah, let's do that.
We'll wait till your closing to answer that question. Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to also add to the debate. So I'm very proud that I send my children to a Christian school. I'm a Catholic, but I send them to an Anglican school. I believe in faith and Christian faith, and I'm proud that my mother brought me up as a Catholic and respecting the Christian ways. I send them to a Christian school because I believe in the education that they get in the Christian faith that delivers that education in a proper way to look after our community. It helps guide and believe. There was a saying from the great writings, and it was called the Desiderata, and it says, "Be at peace with your God, whatever you conceive it, him or her to be." I support not removing the prayer from our council meeting schedule. Thank you. At that, I'll refer back to Councillor Harry Councillor Herry, who has a 2-minute right of reply. Thank you, Councillor.
But you've given me so much to work with. So regarding Councillor Grant's comments, a personal opinion, it's certainly not a personal opinion only held by myself. As I said, I had many conversations, yes, and there has been a quite vigorous community discussion on the matter, and there has been a very strong indication that the majority of people involved in that discussion in some forums certainly would like to see the practice removed. Regarding references to predominantly Christian and to the ABS, I would suggest that they're complete misstatements, because our community is not predominantly Christian. It has a 48.4% identification. It's a significantly declining rate. So, regarding invocation and inner spiritual, that was a theme that came up with a number of people, that we need something to guide us in a spiritual manner. As I said in my conversation 2 weeks ago with councillors when I presented multiple various potential notices of motion for discussion, and as I will reiterate now, I am open to exploring the different ways that this matter can be resolved. It's not a binary choice. The motion that's on the table is not the only outcome, as much as you can paint it that way. So we could have a multi-faith situation I haven't heard anyone speak about that potential resolution. In lieu of consultation also, Councillor Fuller, we certainly could have a motion amended or an alternate motion which requires consultation if that is the sticking point for us. If we just need more information on the table, or if we need a different resolution on the table. Councillor Benton's comments, spiritual guidance again, yes. Ultimately, as I said, there's nothing in the Local Government Act or Constitution requiring this. Indeed, the Constitution's reference to religion actually says that the Commonwealth shan't make any law for imposing any religious observance. It hasn't been tested in the courts, but it's there. And I guess almost finally, Councillor Fitzpatrick, to answer your question, maybe I reply with a question. Did you achieve everything that you wanted to immediately when you came into council in your first years or your first term even? This hasn't been an easy conversation for me to bring to the table. It's certainly been an uncomfortable position for me to hold with respect to being someone of secular beliefs and being required to have religious observance as part of my participation here. I do think about someone who holds a different faith base and comes into this room. If they're required to chair these meetings, if they're the deputy mayor, if they're the mayor, I wouldn't like to see them in the position where they're required to conduct observance of what is clearly a Christian prayer, elevating a single faith or a faith above all other faiths, giving preferential treatment. So I think I will just wrap it up there, but I do appreciate the comments and the debate and discussion from my fellow councillors. I do encourage you to consider and think about supporting this. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herrick. So without further ado, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hands. The motion is not carried and reverts back to keeping the prayer. Thank you, everybody.
Just a moment.
Yes, did you want to do a division?
That's a good idea, actually. No, I'll do a division, yes.
Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation?
Sorry,
in favour?
Yep.
Councillor Herrick. Can that be noted? Councillor Herrick. All those against the recommendation? Councillor Fuller, Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Benton, Councillor Bussell, Councillor Grant and Councillor Rees. Thank you.
All right. Now, the second point, can I move another motion at this point in the meeting?
No.
No, okay.
It's not urgent business. Thank you. We'll move on to we're moving on to 21, which is a public question time. Are there any questions from the gallery? Fantastic. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 22, confidential business. I'd like to move a recommendation that we suspend standing orders. Councillor Benton, are you happy to move that recommendation? And a seconder, please. Councillor Grant?
For formality, it's not to suspend standing orders.
To suspend standing...
Is it? No, the format is that...
What's on the screen?
It's
close the member. Yeah, so what's on the screen there, if not suspend standing orders.
It's the recommendation, sorry. Yes, the recommendation is to close the meeting.
I'll move it, Mr Mayor, because you're not able to. So I'll move the motion that the council resolves to close the meeting to members of the public in accordance with Division 3, Section 1 of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following items. Chief Executive Officer Annual Appraisal 2023. Item 22.1 is confidential under the Local Government Act 2020 as it contains information relating to Section F, personal information.
Thank you. So can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Benton. Were all those in favour?
Carriage.
And the recommendation is carried, so we'll move out to the private room. Can I ask one Hernandez to come in? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do want to leave the meeting from here on, I will be only coming back to resume the general business and just to close the meeting. So you're certainly welcome to stay. Otherwise, this could take a short period of time. Thank you. It's a long time for you. I'm feeling it. I'm mine. I can only come rest of the way.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move a motion to resume standing or to reopen the meeting. I apologise.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller, for that recommendation. Second to Councillor Bussell to second. All those in favour? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's come to the end of our evening and it's come to the end of our council year. There will be no more council meetings unless something urgent, dire or urgent pops up. Can I just say a big thank you to the two lovely ladies at the back. Thank you, Jess and Megan, didn't forget today, for the outstanding job you've done here at Council, and especially why Amy has been absent. And I'd like to call out to Amy as well to say hello, Merry Christmas to you, Amy. We miss you and can't wait for you to be back. To all my fellow councillors, thanks for your great hard year, and topics sometimes don't always come up that are easy to process. And I think we've done a good job, and let's look forward to 2024. To our corporate management team, thank you again for being supportive of myself and all my fellow councillors here. We work great as a team, and let's make sure that we continue it. To the people of Wangaratta, all I want to say is please stay safe over these holiday periods and this great Christmas period that we revolve most of our travelling, etc. around. I wish you all a happy Christmas, but most importantly, stay safe, drive a little bit slower, get there 10 minutes late. We love to see you back here next year. So to everybody, happy Christmas. And